Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I am super excited to share this. I am your blood-sucking host for this channel, Jason. I was sent the Tarot of the Vampires. This is a Llewellyn deck that was recently published back in July. And story time before I get into the video. The lovely and legendary Tom Benjamin did a video about this deck alongside another Llewellyn vampire deck that's much older, but it's in the same realm. He had brought many valid points in his video, which I will put in his video in the description box below. Obviously, if you go check his video out, you'll know that he was more critical about this deck, whereas I'm going to be more positive. For one, this aesthetic, it suits me. I am a big Llewellyn fan, but aside from that, the actual illustrations and the more modernized version of tarot cards, that just speaks more to me. So when I had saw this on pre-order many months ago on Llewellyn's website, I saw some of the cards that they had presented, and it was not my thing. So the main consensus of this video is don't judge a book. Well, yeah, don't judge a book by its cover or cards, but rather the guidebook. So this is one of the few decks that I read the guidebook front to back, and I think that made a whole world of difference, because some of these, well, the majority of these cards, when I first saw them, I was like, I have no clue what you're trying to go for. So thankfully, this guidebook really goes into the illustrators or the creators' intent of the cards, and it just made a more impactful impression on me. So I do want to say a big thank you to Tom for sending me this deck. I am very appreciative, so thank you. So let's get into it, shall we? The Tarot of the Vampires is illustrated by Craig Mayer, and the guidebook is by Charles Harrington. Sink your fangs into the mysteries of life and seek out your darkest desires. This thrilling deck resurrects vampire archetypes for a new age. These children of the night are modern, nuanced, and deadly creatures who will inspire you to unearth forgotten treasures within yourself. Craig Mayer's illustrations explore themes of power, conflict, romance, and adventure. Woven throughout the cards is the internal human story told through the eyes of vampires, and the companion book by Charles Harrington reveals how their journey gives you new insights into the cards. This Rider-Waite-Smith base deck opens your eyes to the wonders of life, death, and what it's like to move through the world as an outsider. So, of course, as Llewellyn, I love their boxes. It's this pretty big box. It opens up with the magnetic cover or magnetic side. Got this lovely Ten of Pentacles image here. And then you have the lovely guidebook, which I will get into. And it has this ribbon to pull open so you can get the cards, and it has the image of the back. So what I was thinking about for this video, I think what I'm going to do is actually go through the guidebook as I'm going through the cards, because you get this lovely massive image of the card. And later in the video, I will do a quick, walkthrough of the deck so you can see the cards, but I'm going to be focusing on the cards within the guidebook because you can see the artwork clearer. So the Codex of the Vampires, written by Charles Harrington, full color, love a Llewellyn guidebook. Talks about the author and illustrator, and then it goes into the contents. Two of Pentacles here. See, without looking at the guidebook, I wouldn't appreciate this card or this image without looking at the book. First topic is Come Away With Me in the Night, which is a brief introduction of the essence of the deck and the cards. Nothing too major. When you get into the chapter 1 in the Shadow of the Vampire, it talks about the vampire fiction starting back from 1897 from the iconic Bram Stoker's book, Dracula, of course. It's very interesting to read about how this deck is modernized to fit today's vampire. So this is giving very Twilight, very True Blood, and Vampire Diaries. There is a sentence or two about here talking about sexuality and queerness and gender nonconformity. I wish the book had elaborated more about this or talked about it more, because that's such a fantastic and interesting topic when it comes to vampires, because I associate vampires with sexuality and sensuality. So it would have been really interesting to learn more, especially when they talk about how vampires are extra. The next is just the overall description of the history of tarot. So it's very generic, talks about the history, of course. Chapter 3, A Deck of Shadows, it just talks about the structure of the deck, and talks about like the major arcana, the minors, and then it talks about the court cards. This is also where it goes into, it gives a brief talk about the actual gender norms, where you can see a queen. It doesn't necessarily have to be female. It could be a non-binary person. I wish the guidebook had just went more into that. And then, of course, chapter 4 is about how to do a tarot reading, talking about reading reversals, tarot journals. And then here it's very interesting. They talk about, in order to keep the Tarot of the Vampire as accessible as possible, they've avoided adding symbolism to the cards, where here in the deck, it mostly focuses on the vampire symbolism, which I really, really like. And going into the back of the cards, if I did not read this guidebook, I wouldn't understand the backs, and it just made more of an impact. So the lilies represent mortals and humanity. They symbolize the purity of the untainted human characters in the deck, whereas the rose symbolizes vampirism and the sensual life of those who have chosen eternal night and awakened to their own desires. Now, I don't know if these two flowers in the traditional tarot sense means that, but I wouldn't have known if I didn't read this guidebook front to back. And then it talks about blessing your deck, which is very generic, helpful hints if you are into that. And then it goes into tarot spreads. Now, usually I find that Llewellyn provides themed spreads. Here, they don't seem as themed and tailored to a vampire spread. Maybe between heaven and hell, but I would have liked more themed spreads, whereas these seems a little bit more generic or more, easy to find. Then it talks about the shadow work, if you are into shadow work. And then finally, chapter 7 is about the structure of the descriptions and meanings. And then we get into the major arcana, folks. So we have the Fool starting off the major arcana. Now in the major arcana, it focuses on this girl, young woman, who has been tempted by this very handsome vampire to essentially become a vampire. So it's a story in the major arcana, which I really appreciate that. I like when theme decks have a story to it. So we have the rose and the lily featured in the card, and it talks about how this young woman is taking the leap of faith to try something new. Whether she realizes this person is vampire or not, it's very foolish. It's giving very full energy, like taking that leap of faith and just doing something new without thinking too much about the consequences. Going into the Magician here, very traditional. Has all 4 suits in the card or within the tarot. And then here you have the affinity symbol coming out of his arm, and it's all bloody. Going into the High Priestess, not a favorite, not a fan of this. The High Priestess is all about following intuition and leading with, your heart, thinking with your mind. It's very intention, very intuitive. Not really getting why the moon and the sun is connected here and with the two hearts on fire or highlighted. Um, so for the meanings, you have the first paragraph talking about what's going on in the card. Really didn't understand the intention of this illustration to go with the high priestess, but what have you, what have you. And then it talks about the essence of the card, and then in the bottom it has the reversal meanings. Still not a fan of this high priestess, no matter how many times I've read this. I just don't see how this correlates to high priestess. Going into the Empress, another card that is just not my favorite because look at this big ass snake. No, if the snake was gone, I would have liked this better. So the Empress is about all that nurturing quality, being creative, and um, just it's fertility. It's just a wonderful card, but the illustration to me, ugh, if it wasn't for that damn snake. And then the Emperor here, we have a very sexy Emperor. So it's all about leadership qualities, being in the forefront, being someone who is respected, right? The Hierophant, oh, one of my favorite Hierophants, to be honest. I'm not a big fan of the traditional artwork for the Hierophant, but for this, you have a church, you have the Virgin Mary, I believe, the Blessed Virgin, and then you have this bouquet of roses and lilies. So this depicts not only religion, but it also, being educated, being wise, and going to someone for help when you need advice, seeking mentorship. And then the lovers here, we're going back from the character from The Fool with this gentleman here. Then you have the angel. So she is basically offering her blood to the vampire. And it's about, a turning point for this two individuals. The Chariot, very Mardi Gras. This is about balancing, going with the flow of, suppressing conflict. You have the happy, you have the sad, you have the happy. This vampire is basically, kind of creating that balance. And then the Strength card here, very interesting read here. It talks about the vampire having that thirst for blood, and if it becomes too powerful, then that kind of it kind of takes away our strength because we're letting it take over. So I really like this depiction of the actual, I guess, the primal or some type of animal is really um, testing one's strength. The Hermit, you have this, vampire up on where the gargoyle is, basically just retreating, being reclusive, and just figuring out oneself and just trying to figure out the next move. And another thing that Tom had mentioned in his video of how some of these cards don't really speak vampire, in terms of like, you wouldn't know this was a vampire if you did not read the guidebook. So this is one of those decks where I highly, highly suggest you read the guidebook. The Wheel of Fortune, not my favorite, but reading it, I get it. It basically talks about the cycle of life, how the wolf hunts the rabbit, and it's just in an endless cycle. So the Wheel of Fortune is about, what comes up must go down, things like that. So while it's not my favorite, I get it. The Justice, again, another one. This is a vampire hunter who's training to hunt a vampire, and here it connects of how has this vampire hunter done enough to satisfy their need to hunt vampires. Maybe this person had a vampire kill their loved one, but did this person do enough? The Hanged Man, one of my favorites because it really depicts a vampire hanging upside down. It talks about the legend of ancient vampire's ability to enter a state of intentional hibernation. So this vampire is definitely hibernating. So it gives that idea of being secluding oneself to get that perspective from without complicating things. Sometimes we just have to, look at another person's perspective to fully get it. And then death here, very Twilight, very True Blood, if I may be honest. So the death card is all about change. It's about something coming to an end, but that end is a beginning to something else. So we have here this person from the Fool, and this gentleman here, he has really bitten her neck, so she's going to turn into a vampire. So essentially, she is dying, but she is going to come back as a vampire. The Temperance card here, this is very interesting. So we have a vampire here, and she is actually creating a potion where she can control that that hunger to go out and hunt. Here, she is mixing things where she can create a potion where she doesn't have to always go out for the hunt. So that was a really interesting take about the Temperance, because it's about creating harmony, creating that balance. You have the lilies here. And she is actually using her own blood to create this potion, which was interesting. The Devil card here, we have the Fool. This is very interesting because they find themselves being, tempted by the devil, and the devil is, feeding these individuals their blood. So the blood of the vampire is essentially going to give them that everlasting life. So the devil is also a sign of deception. So not only will you get eternal life, but what is the cost of that, right? The tower, a very classic tower. I really like this. So these people um, have probably found the vampire's lair and decide to take it down, right? So the tower is all about having that foundation that we built, but it's being destroyed, it's crumbling, and um, it's about chaos, actually. It's about, when things are destroyed, we have to build it back up to better suit us. The Star, not my favorite. So essentially, this vampire is floating in the sky because she can. And yeah, that's all I can get. The Star is all about hope. After this traumatic experience with the tower, the Star is all about having hope because better things are coming. Not really getting why a vampire is just floating up to the star, essentially. The Moon, I really like this. We have a beautiful woman here in the water, but if you look at the water, she's not who she seems, which I really like that. The moon is always about being, something mysterious happening in our lives anyway. So I like this. You can see that she just does not seem what she is presenting. And then the sun, although I like this illustration, I don't see it as the sun. Where the sun, I feel it is a card about, being happy, doing things that you like, and just, it's a card that brings warmth. Here, I don't get that. So we're seeing here that this person is being pursued by a vampire. So this person is bursting through the window and grabbing a hold of the vampire so that this vampire can come out in the sun with them. Yeah, it's very interesting. I love the image, but I don't see it as the sun. And in the Judgment, this is very interesting. So we have the Fool here. This is actually the Fool. She has come to her senses. She's having that aha moment and realized that she has been deceived by the devil, the main vampire, if that's what you want to call it. Then we have the gentleman here and then another vampire hunter. She has come to realization that if she kills the main one, maybe she will have a better purpose in life. She's realized that she has been deceived, about having that aha moment. And then the world, you have the main character, the fool here. She has the rose, the lily, and she is sitting on top of a, looks like a globe. So the world is basically the end of a journey. It is a sign of being, it's a very positive card. And the way she has been described, she has endured much to get to this place, and she's transformed and joyous, finally alive and aware. All right, so we get into the minor arcana here. So you have a brief description of what the wands mean and how it correlates to the vampires. So here it is is it an ankh, or maybe an ankh? It's an ancient Egyptian symbol for life. So how it correlates to vampires. So of course the vampires hold the vitality sacred. So in ancient Egypt, these ankh wands are used principally by mystically inclined vampires known as blood magens, who can tap into their own vitality to create dazzling effects. So the wands is about our desires and motivations. We have the ace here. Very beautiful. Talks more about the ancient ankh and how it is a symbol of life. Now, the Two of Wands, I didn't like this card, but when I read this, I got it. So we have a vampire here high above the sky, and he has two ethereal wings formed with the power of magic blood. If his power holds, he will soar through the skies. Should his power fail, he will plummet to the earth. So for the Two of Wands, I always see this as a planning card. So we have the vampire here planning to make his move. And then the Three is all about that action, right? I don't care too much for this image. I don't see how it correlates too much to the actual action of the Three of Wands. But it talks about this vampire performing a ritual, and she's luring, maybe this is a human, with the aroma of the incense. So essentially, this person is traveling, but I would have liked to seen her do some type of traveling, whereas this person, she's having someone else travel to her to perhaps bite their neck and become a vampire. Then the Four, you have the celebratory card. So this vampire is being celebrated in a nightclub, and it's really cool how these two individuals have like their blood pumping, and you could see their veins and all of this. Then the Five, you have the conflict card. So we have here 5 vampires engaging in combat, giving me a little bit of Matrix, a little bit of Blade. Talks about how competition and testing our own plans and opinions when we have others involved. The 6, that victorious card. After being in battle, you're coming back to your homeland and being praised for your victory. The 7, being on the defense. We have a vampire here reacting to an attack with these ankhs. I would have liked to seen this vampire maybe being against something, whereas it looks like she's fleeing. I don't see her being as defensive, right? I like to see the character being up against something where they're as seen as being defensive. This is like they're fleeing. So it's okay. The 8 of Wands here, we have this vampire who is turning or transforming into 8 bats. The 8 of Wands is about movement, right? Going with the flow. Then the 9 of Wands, we have this human who has barricaded herself within this home, and assumingly the vampires are out on the other side. So the 9 of Wands is about reaching the peak of the end of the wands. We have been through a lot, but we are almost there. Just keep on trucking. And then the 10 here, this is interesting. It briefly talks about maybe having a romantic partner or a meal. As you can see here, it looks like it's 2 males. I would have liked to seen something about if this were 2 men. I don't know. I just would have liked more about the queerness if this was a queer representation. So the 10 of Wands is about being exhausted by our work. It's about putting the burdens, the unnecessary burdens, and delegating them to someone else. So I'm not necessarily getting that energy with this card. So there's that, folks. And then going into the court cards, we have a page here. The pages are always about curiosity and learning. So we have a person here reading spells from an ancient grimoire. Then the knight here, we have a vampire musician singing into this microphone ankh. And knights are more experienced, and they're going to go out into the world and test their skills that they've learned as a page. The queen, very, very beautiful page. I mean, queen, look at this. She is living her best life. So queens of wands are actions, natural and instinctual. They have a strong influence on others, as always. I mean, this queen, come on, she is slaying. The king, oh, look at this sexy king. He is actually the cover of the book. This is giving me very The Fog vibes with these glowing red eyes. Kings are the master of their suit, just like the queens. They have enough experience and power to command others in their field. Now, for the court card system, the book talks about how the courts are persons. If you read court cards like that, then you will get this. I'm still not sure about how I read the court card system because I still struggle with reading the courts. Either I read them as an energy or a person or an archetype. It's just very confusing. So we get into the cups here. Cups are chalices, and the chalices and vessels marked are representing worlds coming together in unity and hint at the mysteries of the Holy Grail. The vampires in this suit seek out connection to remind themselves of their human souls. Ooh, beautiful Ace of Cups. So we have a chalice here full with blood with a vampire holding it. The two, not a fan of this two. So we have here, this man is offering his wrist to this vampire. So the two is, always see it as a connection card or like go on a date card. So this was interesting to read. Talks about how this could be a great potential for a healthy partnership and a romance. The 3, the celebratory card, I'm fine with this. It's very generic for me. We have 3 vampires who are up in the sky with their 3 chalices. It's about having, sharing that connection with the 2 and bringing someone else in the group. It's about having connection with loved ones and friends and family. And then the 4, this was very interesting. So we have a vampire here who is going into a mini fridge and taking out one of the chilled bags of plasma. By restricting his diet to the frozen section, he has remained safe and secure, but a breeze through his open window seems to call him forth into the night to hunt for something fresh. So the 4 of Cups is being aware that something is missing, and you need to identify the area that is out of alignment and then go find what your heart most longs for. So this was just a very interesting take. If I did not read the guidebook, I wouldn't understand this as much. So I like it. Going into the 5, perfect example of a 5 of cups. We have a vampire visiting the graves of her loved ones. So this vampire, she is shaking up by the chaos of the 5. This is a card of loss and disappointment, and we must accept that despite our deepest wishes, we cannot have all that we want. Pain is part of life. And you have here the lilies, and then you have these two, assumingly, vampires holding the 2 roses. The 6, oh, this is a really cute 6 of cups. We have, assumingly, this father and daughter are sharing bowls of cereal. Count Chocula, I assume they did not have the rights to that vampire cereal. But the 6 is also about kindness and having that nostalgia. Ask us to remember an easier time when life was filled with hope and cheer, because when you become a vampire, all things are really gloomy, right? Going into the 7 here, we have a vampire who is going to a ball and she is choosing which mask she would like to put on. And the 7 of Cups is having all these different options in front of you, and you essentially have to pick what's going to better serve you in the end. The 8 of Cups, another interesting illustration. So it talks about how this person, as a human, she prized her beauty above all else, but when she chose to become a vampire to preserve that beauty, she did not realize that it was a curse shared by the species of the undead that hides their reflection forever. So she can no longer see herself in the mirror. So I thought that was really, really interesting. The 9 here, this is basically having your wishes come true. It talks about the legend of Elizabeth Bathory, who was the infamous Blood Countess, who kept unnaturally young and beautiful by bathing in the blood of virgins. And then the 10, this was very interesting. So we have the mortal, the human, and the vampire from the 2 who have beaten the odds and somehow made this unusual arrangement work. They're clinked their glasses to their lasting success. He sips a beer while she enjoys a new commercially available blood substitute that ensures she is no longer in danger of feeding him. The page have a vampire artist. Now, I also did notice when I was reading the court cards, the first sentence or 2 of the second paragraph repeats. So pages embody curiosity and learning. This is also the same for the wands. Pages embody curiosity and learning. Like students, they explore the many facets of the suit's element. And it should be the same. Like students, they explore the many facets of the growing along the way. I thought that was redundant, but repetitive. But I like that it was there because it reminded me. For the Knight of Cups here, we have someone who is essentially offering us a ride on their motorcycle. So this was very interesting, giving me very romantic vibes. But is this a vampire? We don't know. The Queen here is showing that this is a psychic vampire who is drawing their strength from the minds and spirits of others. And then the King, I thought this was Dracula himself, but it's just the Lord of the Manor. And going into the Suit of Swords, which is my favorite in tarot. This is actual sword, and it's represented by an array of weaponry and sharp, stabby implements. Here you will find the schemes and maneuvers of the most cunning and aggressive vampires alongside their deadliest enemies. The Suit of Swords is always about our communication and our critical thinking, so I really like that. The Ace of Swords, you have a generic vampire holding the weaponry. This was interesting. For the Two of Swords, we have a hunter who is calm and focused. However, a supernatural mist swirls in the darkness, making it impossible for them to rely on eyesight alone. Muscles strain as natural fear and anxiety cry out to make a move, but their training has prepared them for this test. With perfect poise, they must wait for their other senses to speak clearly to them, and they will strike only at the most opportune moment. So the 2 represents basically a pause in conflicts about um, opposing sides and needing to rethink their position. The 3, another interesting card here. We have a human who is basically awakening in horror to her worst nightmare. Strapped to her cot, she sees 3 sword like needles piercing her and drawing her life blood from her body. That is probably a good way of saying, like, if our blood leaves our body, we are just basically dead. So that is a very nightmarish thought. So the 3 of Swords is about experiencing grief, heartache, and just basically it's putting us in a very difficult position and how to deal with this traumatic event. And then coming off of the 3, we are going to be reclusive. We're going to be retreating. So in the 4 of Swords here, we have a vampire who is sleeping the day away in her coffin. Then the 5 of Swords, while I like this illustration, I don't see it as a 5 of Swords as the way I thought. So we have a brutal battle. Brutal battle has taken place. 2 vampires thought they had found an easy target, but they were surprised to discover that there was more to him than meets the eye. So these 2 vampires thought that this person was just a mere mortal, but in fact, they were a vampire. So the 5 of Swords is about having a brawl, but at what cost? So I would have liked to have seen maybe one of these vampires still alive somehow. Um, yeah, I just don't see this as the 5. But great illustration though. The 6 here, we have 2 vampires who are basically making their next move and traveling to another journey. So the 6 of Swords is about leaving behind what is familiar and developing new solutions. So we have here the vampire who is, maybe rethinking themselves, but we have another vampire here is kind of grabbing this person saying, no, we're going to be better off if we leave. So I really like this. The 7 of Swords, this is a card that I just did not understand. So we have a vampire here who is confronted by, even though it says several, 2 mortals armed with guns. So a human would be finished, but she hasn't been human for a long time and doesn't need to play by their rules anymore. She moves with preternatural speed and grace, easily evading their bullets. Some might call this cheating. These guys should be worried. So it's very matrix-y. So the 7 of Swords is all about being thievery, being deceptive. So while I get it, if I didn't read the guidebook again, I wouldn't understand this. Then the 8 of Swords here, this was interesting. So we have a person who is in the Hall of Mirrors who thinks she's courted by lots of vampires. However, it's really only one vampire. This is just a little confusing since vampires can't see themselves within a mirror. But maybe from her perspective, they had to show that. Yeah, that would make more sense. So the 8 of Swords is about being trapped. However, it's always because of our mental stress. It scares us into thinking we can't move, we can't do anything. Then the 9 here, the nightmare card. So we have a person who is jolting out of bed because they have a vampire at the foot of their bed. The 9 of Swords is all about having our mind being so overburdened by stress and responsibilities that we really cannot sleep. The 10 of Swords is about the end. It's about raising the white flag of surrender and accepting a loss and moving on from it. So we have a vampire who has been stabbed basically to death. Then we have the Page. High up on a ledge of a tall building, his attire and posture suggest that his mission is one of stealth and secrecy. The Knight, vampire warrior, springing into action. Let me know in the comments below how you guys see court cards. Can you give me advice on how to learn them? The Queen of Swords is the Of course, the cover of the box. It is a deadly lady offering a smile as she draws her slim blade from its unobtrusive cane. She has been underestimated before, and like the falcon on her shoulder, is quite good at sizing up her prey. The king, this is a really cool king. So it talks about how this vampire is at his throne, resting his hand on a skull of a vanquished enemy, a trophy of his victories and a reminder of his own vulnerabilities. So you can see he has been to war. He has scratches all over his face and chest. And then finally, the pentacles. Vampires' virtual immortality allows them to accumulate great wealth and power for themselves. The Pentacles are depicted as the seal of the Eternal Order, a shadow government made up of elite vampires who meddle in the affairs of mortal nations and manipulate the world in accordance with their designs. Oh, fabulous. Ace of Pentacles have a vampire seemingly coming out of the ground, grasping for that new potential. The two love this too. So this mortal is actually balancing. It shows that this person is choosing between his family or getting bitten by this vampire. Going into the 3, that collaboration card. This was interesting. So a meeting is taking place high above the urban sprawl. A member of the vampire's ruling council is joined by a police captain and a priest to discuss matters at hand. Red circles mark out a map of the city, and packets bearing the seal of the Eternal Order are placed before the leaders. The 4 of Pentacles, we have a vampire who is sleeping, and when they are sleeping, they are at the most vulnerable. To compensate this, the vampire has enclosed their coffin in an impregnable vault protected by reinforced steel, lasers, hidden traps, and a very loyal Doberman familiar. Nothing will get past their safeguards. So the 4 of Pentacles is all about hoarding or taking resources or inventory of our resources. So I thought this was interesting. The more I looked at it, the more I understood it, because I can see this as a very 4 of Swords where they're retreating. But with all these, fancy gadgets and stuff, I can see how it relates to wealth. The 5 here, we have a teenager who is hiding in the shadows of trash cans out of view of the glaring lights. Trembling fingers reach towards mouth, feeling teeth that have somehow become sharp. A line of gold coins form a pathway out of the alley and directly toward the police car. The police might have helped him as he was before, but how will they treat him now that he has become something else? So the 5 is all about being in that state of needing help. But here we're seeing that this person needs help, but will they go to the police for it, even though they are turning? Will that help even help? The 6 here about giving and receiving. This was interesting. So we have a vampire injecting their own blood into a sleeping patient's IV bag. The blood of a vampire has powerful healing properties, and we see that it glows with light as it travels into the patient's veins. Her wounds seem severe, but the magic in the blood will speed her recovery. So it's all about giving, receiving, and helping others. Going to the 7, this was a beautiful interpretation of the 7. So we have a vampire tending to her poison garden of nightshade, foxglove, poison ivy, hemlock, and more. These deadly life forms are delicate, but their caretaker has uncovered a great secret. Her lifeblood gives an invigorating fertilizer, for life, after all, feeds on death. Sometimes you have to pour yourself into your work. So the 7 of Pentacles is about taking a step back and appreciating how far you've come. The 8 here, we have a vampire artist sits beneath the great seal of the Eternal Order, the sign of the undead reign over this world. He labors over a set of designs, seeking to improve upon the perfection of centuries. The 8 is all about mastering one's craft. Going into the 9 here, this was interesting. So we have a lady of the manor playing a piano in her favorite room. And then she has a Roman bust assembling her. The hand-painted wallpaper is exquisite, and she claims original to the house. Apparently, it's been in her family for a long, long time. So the Nine of Pentacles is about enjoying one's wealth and investing our time and energy and money to maximize the benefits they bring. So I'm not necessarily getting Nine of Pentacles here. I would have liked to seen maybe the lady of the manor in a lush garden or something. So from the beginning of the Two of Pentacles, we have this gentleman here who has made his choice, and he has decided to go with the vampire and have that eternal life. The Ten of Pentacles is about um, basically remembering our roots, and the success depicted here is the sort that is passed down through generations. So we should consider what we have received from our predecessors and the legacy we are creating for the future. The page, this is actually a lawyer vampire. The knight, this is a vampire bodyguard. Going into the queen, she is bathing her skin in the light of the waxing moon. Then finally, the king. This was interesting. So the Lord of the Vaults is the keeper of one of the vampire's most precious resources, their hidden blood reserves. So this king is actually preserving and keeping these hidden blood reserves secret and safe. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go ahead and shuffle these cards and pick a card. The cardstock is that lovely Llewellyn cardstock that I really enjoy. It's glossy, but it fans beautifully. All right, we have the Knight of Swords. Of course, I would get a core card. So a vampire warrior springs into action, leaping toward her prey. Her blades fly forth as quickly as she can throw them, finding their targets with deadly accuracy. Nothing can withstand her merciless onslaught. Knights have grown enough in their suit's element to go out in the world and test their skills. They are seekers and action-oriented. The Knight of Swords brings a special intensity to their mission. As a person, this card represents someone direct, intense, and impulsive. They act first and ask questions later, or never. They are adept and skilled, attending quickly to what is needed. He who hesitates is lost, and the Knight of Swords doesn't like to lose. This is the swiftest of the knights. Their card urges us to act quickly and decisively. They rely on instinct, making fast judgments about people as well. This card reminds us not to indulge and worry about what will happen 3 or 4 steps down the road. That's just borrowing trouble. Focus on the here and now and make the best decision you can with the information you have. The Knight of Swords has no use for regrets. They've already moved on to the next fork in their path. Let go of what has already happened. Give up hope for a different past. With the card reversed, this knight easily leaps into disaster. A reversed knight tells you to slow down and assess things more thoughtfully. Look before you leap. All in all, I actually like this deck. I think if I didn't read the guidebook front and back, I don't think I would appreciate the illustrations as much. Again, I can't stress this enough. I think the guidebook is vital. It's crucial to understand the creator's intent in some of these cards, even though I don't still understand some of the cards, like the sun. There we go. I still don't understand how it correlates to the essence of the sun, but those type of cards, they are very few and far between. I think Charles and Craig did a wonderful job in this retelling, more modernized version of the vampire. I just wish there was more information regarding the sexuality and the queerness and the non-conformity. I just wish there was more information regarding the queerness and the gender nonconformity within the illustrations. but that's fine. I think this is going to make a perfect addition to my tarot deck library. So again, thank you, Tom, for sending me this deck. And of course, thank you, the viewer, for watching this video on the Tarot of the Vampires. Stick around so you can actually see me going through quickly through the actual cards. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you for my next video. Take care.